Have you ever noticed that fear becomes loudest when everything around you becomes quiet? During the day, you may be able to distract yourself. There are people to speak with, responsibilities to complete, messages to answer, and problems that demand your attention. But late at night, when the noise of the world begins to fade, the questions return. What if things do not work out? What if you lose someone you love? What if you made the wrong decision? What if the future is not going to unfold the way you hoped? And beneath all these questions, there may be an even more painful one. What if God has forgotten you? Perhaps you have prayed and still felt afraid. You have tried to trust, yet some part of you continues preparing for the worst. You may appear calm to the people around you, while inside your mind is carrying situations that have not even happened. You search for reassurance. You look for signs. You replay conversations. You imagine different outcomes. You tell yourself that you will finally feel peaceful when you understand what is happening, when someone gives you an answer, or when the uncertainty is removed. But what if peace is not waiting at the end of uncertainty? What if peace is already here, beneath the part of you that believes it must control everything? What if God has never moved away from you? Perhaps fear has simply become so loud that you can no longer hear the quiet presence beneath it. Fear has a way of creating the illusion of distance. It tells you that safety exists somewhere in the future. It tells you that peace will arrive when your relationship becomes secure, when your finances improve, when your body feels stronger, when someone finally understands you, or when every unanswered question has been resolved. Fear asks you to delay your peace until life becomes predictable. Yet life was never designed to become completely predictable. There will always be something you cannot control. There will always be an unanswered question, an unexpected change, or a person whose choices you cannot manage. If your peace depends on controlling everything outside you, peace will always remain fragile. But there is another kind of peace. It does not come from knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. It comes from remembering that whatever tomorrow brings, you will not meet it alone. Imagine the sky on a stormy day. Thick clouds may cover everything. The sunlight may disappear. You may look upward and see only darkness. But the sky has not vanished. The sun has not stopped shining. They are simply hidden for a while. Fear can be like those clouds. It enters your awareness and temporarily hides what is deeper and more enduring. If you identify completely with the storm, you may begin to believe that the storm is all there is. But beneath every anxious thought, there is an awareness noticing it. Beneath the mental noise, there is silence. Beneath the fear, there is life. And perhaps this living presence within you is closer to God than anything your mind could ever explain. You may have learned to search for God outside yourself. You may wait for a dramatic sign, a perfect answer, or a sudden rescue. There is nothing wrong with asking for guidance. But guidance does not always arrive as a voice from the sky. Sometimes guidance appears as the strength to take one more breath. Sometimes it is the quiet realization that you do not need to solve your entire life tonight. Sometimes it is the gentle inner voice telling you to rest before making a decision. Sometimes it appears through the kindness of another person, the warmth of sunlight through a window, or the unexpected peace that comes when you finally stop fighting what you cannot control. These moments may seem ordinary, but the sacred often enters through ordinary doors. Fear rarely introduces itself by saying, "I am fear." More often, it appears as responsibility, caution, preparation, or the need to understand everything before you move forward. It tells you that if you think long enough, plan carefully enough, and anticipate every possible problem, you will eventually feel safe. But have you noticed what happens? The mind solves one concern and quickly creates another. One answer brings temporary relief, but soon a new question appears. Reassurance calms you for a few hours, and then doubt returns in a different form. Eventually, you may begin to realize that the situation is not always the source of your suffering. Sometimes the deeper suffering comes from the belief that you must control the situation before you can be at peace. The ego finds comfort in control because control gives it a sense of importance. It says, everything depends on me. I must hold this together. I must know what happens next. I must prevent anything painful from occurring. Yet beneath that pressure is often a frightened part of you that once learned uncertainty was dangerous. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where love felt unpredictable. Maybe you learned to study the expressions on other people's faces before deciding whether it was safe to speak. You became skilled at reading moods, avoiding conflict, and becoming whatever others needed you to be. At the time, these habits may have helped you survive emotionally, but what once protected you may now be exhausting you. You may still enter relationships believing that love must be managed. You try to say the right thing, avoid disappointing anyone, and keep everyone comfortable. When another person becomes distant, you immediately assume you have done something wrong. When someone is unhappy, you feel responsible for repairing their emotions. Fear tells you that if you stop trying so hard, love will disappear. But love that requires you to abandon yourself is not the love your soul has been seeking. There is a difference between caring for another person and becoming responsible for their entire inner world. There is a difference between compassion and self-erasure. You can be loving without saying yes to everything. You can listen without carrying another person's pain as proof of your worth. You can care deeply while still remaining connected to your own center. This may feel uncomfortable at first because the ego often confuses familiar suffering with safety. If you have spent years earning love through pleasing others, receiving love without performance may feel unfamiliar. Rest may feel selfish. Boundaries may feel cruel. Silence may feel dangerous. But the discomfort of becoming honest is different from the pain of continually abandoning yourself. Spiritual growth does not require you to hate the person you became in order to survive. That version of you was trying to protect something tender. It learned strategies that once had a purpose. You can thank those strategies without continuing to obey them. Imagine a small boat tied to the shore during a storm. The rope prevents it from being swept away. During the storm, the rope is protection. But when the storm ends, the same rope that once protected the boat prevents it from sailing. Many of your emotional habits may be like that rope. They were formed during difficult seasons, but they may now be holding you in place. Fear says, do not untie the rope. The storm may return. Awareness says, the storm has passed, and I am no longer the person I was when it began. This is one of the most important movements of inner awakening. You begin to recognize that not every thought deserves obedience. Not every emotional alarm is a message from your deepest wisdom. Some reactions are echoes. They belong to an earlier chapter, but they continue speaking as if the past were still happening. You may notice this when someone does not reply to a message. Within minutes, the mind creates a story. They are upset. You said something wrong. They no longer care. You feel tension in your body, and before anything has actually happened, you are suffering inside an imagined future. The ego does not simply experience silence. It interprets silence. Awareness allows you to pause before accepting that interpretation. You can notice the tightness in your chest. You can observe the thoughts arriving and say, my mind is trying to protect me by creating an explanation, but I do not yet know what is true. That pause is sacred. It creates space between what happened and the story you tell yourself about what happened. Within that space, peace has an opportunity to enter. Awareness may not remove the emotion immediately. You may still feel unsettled, but it changes your relationship with what you feel. Instead of becoming trapped inside fear, you begin observing it with compassion. You are no longer a frightened thought trying to save itself. You are the awareness in which the thought appears. The sky is not damaged by the clouds that move across it. The ocean is not defined by one restless wave. In the same way, your true nature is not defined by the temporary movements of your mind. Your thoughts can be useful. They can help you prepare, communicate, and make wise choices. But the mind is a tool. It was never meant to become your master. The ego takes this useful tool and turns it into an identity. It says, I am my worries, I am my past, I am the role I play, I am what other people think of me, I am what I have achieved, and I am what I have failed to achieve. Then life becomes an endless attempt to defend a constructed self. You compare your path with the lives of other people because the ego needs measurement. It wants to know whether you are ahead or behind, admired or ignored, successful or forgotten. But comparison never creates lasting peace. There will always be someone who appears more certain, more successful, more loved, or further ahead. If your worth depends on comparison, you will never be able to rest. The soul does not compare. A rose does not look at an oak tree and decide it has failed. The moon does not compete with the sun. Each expresses life according to its own nature. Your path also has its own rhythm. You may be in a season that does not look impressive from the outside. You may be rebuilding after loss. learning to trust again, caring for someone, healing an old wound, or simply trying to make peace with yourself. The world may not applaud these quiet forms of courage, but they matter. Perhaps your purpose in this season is not to become more visible. Perhaps it is to become more real. Fear often tells you that time is running out. It points to your age, your mistakes, or the opportunities you believe you missed. It says you should have understood yourself sooner. You should have chosen differently. You should already be somewhere else. But life does not unfold according to the ego's schedule. A seed does not criticize itself while it is beneath the soil. It does not assume that darkness means failure. It allows roots to form where no one can see them. Your life may also be growing in ways that are not yet visible. Not every season is meant for outward achievement. Some seasons are meant for releasing old identities. Some are meant for grieving, resting, forgiving, and learning to hear your own soul again. Fear calls these seasons wasted time. The Spirit may recognize them as preparation. This does not mean you must pretend that pain is easy or uncertainty is pleasant. Spiritual awareness is not the denial of human emotion. You are allowed to feel tired. You are allowed to admit that you do not understand. You are allowed to sit with your questions without covering them with positive words. You do not need to reject fear in order to become spiritual. In fact, fighting fear can create another form of fear. You become afraid of being afraid. You judge yourself for not feeling calm, and the judgment adds another layer of suffering. What if fear did not need to be defeated? What if it needed to be met? Imagine sitting beside the frightened part of yourself as you would sit beside a child who has awakened from a nightmare. You would not shame the child. You would not demand an immediate explanation. You would offer your presence. You might quietly say, "I am here. You do not have to carry this alone." Perhaps this is one of the ways God's closeness becomes real. It appears through the compassion you offer your own inner world. When you stop rejecting the frightened parts of yourself, you begin creating the safety you have been searching for outside. Love does not always remove fear immediately. Sometimes love simply remains. It breathes with you. It listens. It waits until your body remembers that this moment is not the past. It reminds you that you do not have to solve everything before you deserve to rest. As this awareness deepens, you begin to understand that control and trust are not the same. Control says, life must follow my plan before I can feel safe. Trust says, even when life changes, I can remain connected to something deeper than circumstance. Control tightens your hands. Trust allows them to open. Trust does not mean you stop participating in your life. You still make plans. You speak honestly. You leave what harms you. You seek help. You take responsibility for your actions. But you begin acting from clarity instead of panic. A fearful mind may send a message immediately because silence feels unbearable. Awareness may invite you to breathe before responding. A fearful mind may stay in an unhealthy relationship because loneliness seems worse than self-betrayal. Awareness may remind you that being alone can sometimes be the doorway back to yourself. A fearful mind may replay the past in an attempt to change it. Awareness gently says, this has already happened. What needs love now is the part of me that is still living there. Every time you notice the ego without making it your enemy, its hold begins to soften. The ego is not something you must destroy. The desire to destroy it can become another form of ego. It is simply a pattern of identification. You can notice the voice that compares, controls, blames, and fears. You can thank it for trying to protect you. Then you can choose not to let it lead. Beneath that voice is something quieter. It does not argue for your worth because it knows your worth was never in question. It does not compete because it recognizes the same life moving through all beings. It does not demand certainty because it trusts the intelligence of the present moment. This quiet presence does not disappear when fear arrives. It remains like a lamp in a room filled with shadows. You may forget to look toward it, but it is still shining. Perhaps freedom does not begin when every shadow disappears. Perhaps freedom begins when you remember that the light was never overcome. This is also where forgiveness begins. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. You may believe forgiving someone means saying the pain did not matter, that the betrayal was acceptable, or that the person who hurt you deserves access to your life again. But forgiveness does not require you to deny what happened. It does not ask you to abandon wisdom, boundaries, or self-respect. Forgiveness is the decision to stop allowing the past to occupy the sacred space of the present. Perhaps you have carried someone's words for years, a parent who made you feel invisible, a partner who broke your trust, a friend who disappeared when you needed them most. The person may have moved on, but the conversation continues inside your mind. You replay what happened. You imagine what you should have said. You wait for an apology that may never come. The ego believes holding on will protect you. It tells you anger will prevent the wound from happening again. But anger carried for too long can become a room where you imprison yourself while the other person is no longer there. Forgiveness does not open the door for them. It opens the door for you. You may not be ready to bless the person or understand their choices. You may simply become willing to release the belief that your peace depends on their remorse. You can acknowledge the pain and say, this affected me deeply, but it will not define the rest of my life. This does not erase the past. It changes your relationship with it. Sometimes the person you most need to forgive is yourself. You may look back at decisions you made when you were lonely, afraid, or desperate to be loved. You judge your younger self using wisdom that was only gained through the consequences of those choices. You ask, how could I have stayed so long? Why did I ignore what I knew? Why did I waste so much time? But the person you were then did not have the awareness you have now. Self-forgiveness does not remove responsibility. It allows responsibility to become healing instead of punishment. You can make amends where possible. You can change your behavior. You can learn from what happened without turning your entire identity into a mistake. A garden does not refuse to grow because one season produced no flowers. It receives what remains from that season and you can transform it into nourishment. Your regrets can become nourishment too. They can make you more compassionate. They can deepen your honesty. They can teach you the difference between love and attachment, between intuition and fear, and between caring for someone and abandoning yourself. When guilt has completed its lesson, you do not need to continue wearing it as proof that you are a good person. You are allowed to grow. Growth also requires surrender, and surrender may be one of the most misunderstood spiritual invitations. The ego hears surrender and imagines weakness. It assumes you are being asked to stop caring, stop acting, or accept anything that happens without discernment. But surrender is not giving up on life. It is giving up the illusion that life can unfold in only one acceptable way. Perhaps you have been holding tightly to a particular outcome. You believed a relationship, opportunity, or achievement would finally bring you peace. You prayed for it, worked toward it, and built your future around it. Then the plan changed. A door closed. Someone chose another path. Your body required you to slow down. The life you expected did not arrive. Your first reaction may be resistance. You try to reopen the door. You bargain with the past. You believe peace will return only when reality agrees with your original plan. But sometimes life is not removing your future. It is removing an image of the future that has become too small for your soul. This may not be visible at first. The space after a loss can feel empty. Yet emptiness is not always absence. It can also be openness. A river does not accuse the mountain when its path changes. It bends, slows, deepens, and continues moving toward the sea. You may also be invited to continue differently. Surrender can sound like this: I still care, but I release my demand that this must happen exactly as I imagined. There is freedom in that release. Your energy is no longer consumed by arguing with reality. You become available to guidance that could not enter while you were gripping one outcome. This is where intention becomes different from control. Control says, I must make this person love me. Intention says, I will bring love and honesty into my relationships. Control says, nothing difficult can happen. Intention says, whatever happens, I will meet it with awareness. Control says, I need to see the entire road. Intention says, I am willing to recognize the next honest step. When your intention is rooted in love rather than fear, your actions become lighter. You no longer need every decision to prove your worth. You begin responding to life instead of wrestling with it. Perhaps someone criticizes you, and your body immediately prepares to defend itself. The ego wants to attack, withdraw, or prove that you are right. But awareness creates a pause. Within that pause, you can ask, what is my intention here? Perhaps your intention is not to win. Perhaps it is to remain honest without becoming cruel. You can listen for what is true, release what does not belong to you, and respond from your center. You may still set a boundary. You may still say no. Love does not require silence in the presence of harm. But a boundary created from awareness feels different from a wall built from fear. A wall says, no one will ever hurt me again. A boundary says, I can remain open-hearted without abandoning myself. This is spiritual maturity. You do not close your heart in order to protect it. You learn to protect your peace without turning protection into separation. Trust grows through these small choices. It is rarely a dramatic feeling of certainty. More often, trust is the willingness to take one step without demanding that the entire road be revealed. You may be facing an important decision. You have examined every possibility, asked for advice, and searched for signs, yet the answer remains unclear. Fear wants a guarantee. Your deeper self may offer only a quiet sense of what feels more honest. Trust does not mean the choice will be free from difficulty. It means you are willing to stop betraying your inner knowing simply because fear speaks more loudly. The voice of fear is urgent. It says, decide now, fix this immediately, escape, hold tighter. The voice of inner guidance is usually quieter. It does not threaten. It may simply say, rest before answering. This is no longer true for you. Take the kind step, even if it feels uncomfortable. You may miss this voice when your life is filled with noise. This is why stillness matters. Stillness is not the attempt to make your mind completely empty. It is the practice of no longer following every thought that passes through it. You may sit quietly, breathe, walk beneath the trees, or listen to the sounds around you. Thoughts will continue arriving, but you do not have to build a home inside everyone. Over time, you begin to sense the presence beneath them. You become available to love when you stop rehearsing resentment. You become available to guidance when you stop demanding certainty. You become available to peace when you stop using the present moment to solve every possible future. This does not mean fear will never return. It may visit again when someone you love is struggling, when your health changes, or when life moves beyond your expectations. But fear no longer has to become your identity. You can greet it as a visitor. You can say, I understand why you are here. You want to keep me safe. But you are not the only voice within me. Then you can turn toward what is deeper. You can place your hand over your heart and remember that life is breathing through you. You can feel the ground beneath your feet and recognize that this moment is supporting you. The practice is not to choose love once. The practice is to return to love whenever you notice that you have wandered into fear. Sometimes love looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like leaving. Sometimes it means apologizing. Sometimes it means resting instead of trying to prove yourself. Sometimes it means allowing another person to follow their path without trying to control what they think of you. Love is not always soft in appearance, but it is free from the desire to punish. As you begin living from this deeper place, gratitude appears naturally. Not the kind of forced gratitude that denies pain, but a quieter appreciation for the life that remains present even in uncertainty. You may feel grateful for one peaceful breath, for the person who showed you kindness, for the courage to begin again, for the lesson that emerged from a difficult season. Gratitude shifts your attention from what fear says is missing to what love reveals is already here. This is the return to your true self. You are not trying to create a new spiritual identity. You are releasing the layers that covered what was already present. Beneath the need for approval, there is wholeness. Beneath resentment, there is a heart capable of peace. Beneath control, there is trust. Beneath fear, there is love. You have not been abandoned by God. You may simply have been listening to a voice that could not recognize the sacredness already surrounding you. You do not need to wait for a perfect morning, a silent home, or a life without problems before practicing peace. The presence of God is not limited to sacred places or rare moments of clarity. It can be felt while you wash a cup, sit in traffic, answer a difficult message, or pause quietly before making a decision. The invitation is not to escape your life. It is to enter your life more fully. You may begin the day with a few quiet moments before reaching for your phone. Notice your breath. Feel the life within your body. Remember that you are more than the thoughts waiting to begin. You may say inwardly, before I enter this day, I choose to remember the presence of love. There is no need to force a special feeling. Some mornings you may feel peaceful. Other mornings, the mind may already be crowded with responsibilities and concerns. The practice is not to judge what is present. It is to notice it. Awareness itself is a form of light. When fear appears, pause before following it. Ask whether the thought is describing reality or creating a painful future that has not happened. Listen to what may be beneath the fear. Perhaps it is asking you to rest. Perhaps it is inviting you to have an honest conversation. Perhaps it is revealing an old wound that needs compassion rather than control. You do not have to obey every thought in order to honor what you feel. Throughout the day, practice returning. When you notice yourself comparing your path to someone else's, return. When you feel yourself trying to earn approval, return. When the past begins replaying itself, return. Return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to the quiet question, what would love allow in this moment? At the end of the day, remember a few ordinary moments, a kind expression, a breath of fresh air, a conversation that softened your heart, the strength to endure something difficult without becoming bitter. Gratitude does not deny pain. It reminds you that pain is not the only thing present. And when you recognize that you have acted from fear, forgive yourself before shame builds another prison. Acknowledge what happened. Make a different choice where possible. Then begin again. The source does not ask you to become perfect before you are worthy of peace. Life is always offering another moment of awareness. There will still be days when you forget. You may lose yourself in worry, react from an old wound, or spend hours trying to control something outside your hands. This does not mean the path has disappeared. The moment you become aware, you have already begun returning. Spiritual growth is not a straight line toward permanent calm. It is the deepening ability to come home to yourself with less judgment and greater tenderness. God's closeness was never measured by how peaceful you felt. The divine presence remained during the nights when you doubted, during the moments when you were angry, and during the seasons when prayer seemed to meet only silence. Silence was not always absence. Sometimes silence was the space in which a deeper part of you was learning to listen. Perhaps you can look back now and recognize that you were carried in ways you could not see at the time. Not every situation ended as you hoped. Not every loss was restored. Yet something within you remained. Something continued breathing. Something continued loving. Something continued calling you back. That presence is still here. It does not shout over fear. It waits beneath it. It does not force you to trust. It quietly invites you. And whenever you become still enough to notice, you may remember that you are not a separate being trying to reach a distant God. You are life expressing itself through human form. You are awareness learning through experience. You are love remembering itself beneath layers of fear. You do not need to become someone new. You only need to release what has convinced you that you are less than whole. So as you move forward, allow your life to become a gentle practice of remembering. Remember in the morning. Remember in conflict. Remember in uncertainty. Remember when fear tells you that you are alone. Place your hand over your heart and listen. There is life here. There is presence here. There is a peace that does not depend on having every answer. God has never moved away from you. Fear may still speak, but you no longer have to believe everything it says. You can let its voice pass like wind through the trees. You can remain rooted. You can breathe. You can trust the quiet love beneath the noise. And perhaps in this very moment you can feel it, not as an idea, not as something you must earn, but as the gentle recognition that what you have been searching for has always been closer than your next breath. If this message has awakened something within you, share this sentence in the comments. Today I choose to trust the presence beneath my fear. Your words may become a light for someone who is still learning to trust. Until we meet again, move gently through your life. Release what you cannot control. Forgive what no longer needs to follow you. Trust what speaks through love. And remember that beneath every fearful thought, the source is still present, quietly reminding you that you have never been alone.